Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Using Technology to Support Sustainability Decisions in the Built Environment. We welcome all attendees, and I hope everyone is doing well and keeping safe. This is Anne-Marie Pizzatelli, and I'm the Global Head of Marketing at the BSI Group. Today's topic is of great interest as we discuss how industry and governments leaders use technology to drive forward sustainability initiatives. I would now like to introduce today's speakers. Our first speaker is Keith Bryan, Director, Built Environment at the BSI Group. Keith leads the built environment sector for BSI America, representing the full portfolio of products and services for clients and key stakeholders. He offers a variety of experience integrating holistic solutions into the built environment, including greenhouse gas accounting, climate change, risk management, resilience, environmental social governance, and green building programs. Prior to government consulting, Keith worked for the U.S. Green Building Council as a program integration manager for the certification operations team, where he was responsible for the strategic development of certification platforms for existing and emerging U.S. GBC certification programs. Tim Taylor is the Global Director of Energy and Sustainability at CBRE, the world's largest commercial real estate services and investment firm. Tim manages teams to drive innovation, cost savings, and deliver client-focused outcomes in facilities management services for Fortune 500 clients across the globe. Tim joined CBRE in 2015 and spent several years managing sustainable operations to achieve ambitious client goals in reducing greenhouse gas emissions, energy, waste, and water. Before CBRE, he worked as an account manager at the U.S. Green Building Council, where he customized green building strategies as a top user of LEED. He is a LEED accredited professional and a certified energy manager. Tim holds a master's degree in sustainability and environmental management from Harvard University and a BS in business administration from Elon University. He currently resides in Charlotte, North Carolina, with his wife and 2 daughters. Please join me in welcoming Keith and Tim.
Thanks so much, Anne-Marie. Good to be here.
Thank you, Anne-Marie.
Hi, guys. Looking forward to a great webinar. Just some logistics. Our webinar will run about 60 minutes today with some time for Q&A at the end. You have joined a muted webinar, so you should be able to hear us clearly. If you would like to ask us a question, have a look at the questions box and type your question. We'll do our best to answer these at the end of today's webinar. If you can't hear us, please let us know using the question box. All of our participants today will receive some great featured handouts, including our sustainability report, a green print for a sustainable built environment, plus our popular little book of BIM. And as well, we've got BIM Perspectives case studies. However, you must complete the post-event survey in order to get the handouts. I will give a reminder before the end of the webinar today. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to Keith and Tim.
Great, thanks so much, Anne-Marie. So first, let me just say a big welcome to my fellow speaker, Tim Taylor. Tim and I, like Anne-Marie said, we both worked at the U.S. Green Building Council 10-ish years ago, so it makes me feel old when I say that. So, it's wonderful to have our paths cross again and be able to talk about something that's so timely and relevant to every industry, or at least every industry that works in a building, right? Anyway, so Tim, thank you so much for joining us here at BSI for the discussion today. I appreciate it. So
happy to be here.
All right. So just to briefly scan the goals for today's webinar, we don't want to dive in deep into any particular subject because we know there's a very complex landscape of technology that's out there. So we just want to kind of hit some of these major bullet points. We would call this, I guess, learning points more than an agenda. So we want to know when to look for technology as a solution rather than looking to something like a process improvement. Some common mistakes that are made when you're introducing tech to any of your current processes, some key advantages of having data-driven decision-making, and then just a very high level skim of the type of technologies that are available to support throughout the building life cycle. And Tim will give a few case study examples of the work that CBRE is doing with actual clients. And then of course, we'll open it up for a Q&A session at the very end for anybody to ask any questions that we didn't cover. So next slide.
Oh, we will have some polls in our webinar today, so please take part. It's a great way to engage with others on the poll, on the webinar, and gain insight as well. And so these polls are coming up right now. So here's our first poll, and if you could launch it for us, Jalpa, our producer, thank you. So let's launch the first poll. And the question is, who is attending today? Are you a sustainability professional? Are you a quality professional? A BIM professional? Are you construction and design professional? Perhaps you're a CEO or executive watching. Or other, please use the answer in chat. So let us know who is attending today, and we'll give everybody a few seconds to complete the poll. And so right now, I can see everybody is completing the poll. Thank you for doing this. We'll give everybody a few more seconds, and then we will actually share the results for you. So I will close the poll in a few seconds. So in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, let's close the poll and share the results. So as we can see, we've got 27 or 22% sustainability professionals, 24% quality professionals, 13 BIM, 35 design and construction professionals, and a few CEOs attending. So a great range of professionals attending today. Thank you all for taking part in our polls, and now I will hand it back to Keith and Tim.
Great, thank you, Anne-Marie, and it's wonderful to see such a nice mix. I think that's pretty indicative of the current world of sustainability. It's no longer, a bunch of tree huggers like myself, and that's how it should. So that's good. Okay, so before we jump into this discussing all the cool technology that's around today, I always like to just take a moment to really address some of the biggest challenges of our industry and see what we're dealing with at the moment to kind of set the stage for the impending discussion. So I've listed out a bunch of stuff here. You obviously don't have to read the screen, but I'll just give you an idea. There's obviously a multitude of standards and tracking systems, new technology, the political and cultural shifts towards green initiatives, and then of course we have just the volume of data and the integration of that data into existing processes is often very difficult for people to deal with. And then of course the landscape of innovation is always going to move much more quickly than the process of consensus-based standards. So there's this challenge of comparing and contrasting reporting systems or operating in a non-standardized environment that's kind of like, people equate it to the Wild Wild West, right? So then of course, people have different value propositions. And what I mean by this is not everybody is looking to adopt these technology solutions or sustainability solutions simply out of the goodness of their heart. There are financial and reputational and risk management incentives for adoption of tech platforms as well. Cybersecurity, of course, plays a huge part in the advancement of technology, and the risks that are involved in that can often seem overwhelming and impede or sometimes even completely prevent progress in this field. And last but not least, there's a shortage of folks that can have a discussion of technology and the application of that technology to building systems. So for instance, I used to work in building maintenance, and there was a ton of guys and gals that could do amazing things with fixing building systems, but you put them in front of a computer and they're just kind of out of their element. And that's not anything against them per se, it's just the nature of a highly specialized world that we're now dealing with. So the key takeaway here is what's in that blue box, that most current sustainability challenges are just beyond the ability of any organization to deliver those necessary changes without the implementation of technology assistance. And so that is why we're doing today's webinar. So if we can move to the next slide. One of the biggest things that we wanted to touch on today is the challenge of data. So I mentioned it in the previous slide, that overwhelming amount of data that's now flooding in. And I say that the challenge is data related, and I say that somewhat broadly, intentionally, as in the modern landscape of building technology, we just have too much data to deal with, and we can't process and register all of that. So that presents a variety of challenges, from data governance, where you have different teams that are responsible for reporting versus inputting the data. You have problems with data validation, so not being checked or confirmed when it's being entered, and that creates skewed results on the other end. And when you're trying to integrate that data, you necessarily have to deal with multiple data sources in order to have some sort of effective conclusion on the other end, right? So you're not just dealing with your energy data, you're also dealing with your space utilization data, right? And those have to be combined to get something effective out of there. A lot of these, when you're dealing with energy or weather or anything of that sort, are incredibly large data sets, very labor intensive to deal with manually, and systems intensive to deal with in a technology solution. So that is challenging. And then, of course, just the scale of application is one of the biggest challenges that we have. So as we move from an environment where we're looking at data primarily from a reporting perspective into one that's more of a real-time calculation and application of those results, that is something that's just challenging. So typically what you see out there is that data is often aggregated, but it's not effectively analyzed. So, okay, next slide here. So, one forward there. Okay, cool. So naturally, one of the most immediate responses to that overwhelming amount of data is to implement additional technology solutions in order to help the organization deal with that, right? The issue is that implementing technology without considering it in the context of your entire process can create what I call the illusion of a solution, right? So if I had a nickel for every time I've seen a technology platform that constitutes a 60% solution force fit into organizational processes, I'd be a very rich man. But so when looking at technology solutions, we need to consider them holistically in the context of both the people and the processes that they will affect, not just as a technology solution in and of itself. So step one of this process is often to look for places where tech can immediately replace or remove portions of an existing process, but that's not always the big picture solution for everything. So often there's an opportunity to modify the process itself to become more efficient, rather than simply making an old process faster through technology and keeping it just as inefficient. So next slide. So sustainability is something that is embedded within the entire life cycle of a building, as we've sort of already mentioned. So from design all the way to deconstruction, and with that broad of a scope, we're bound to deal with a range of multiple different types of drivers and maturity models. So if you think about the types of technology that are typically seen in buildings, you can be at very different levels of that maturity model for your, say, your energy management programs, as opposed to your waste management programs or your sustainable investment programs. Might just have different levels of data and the ability to harness that data. So aligning those to your organizational goals can be difficult, right? Especially when you're scanning the market for technology solutions to help move each one of them forward based on differing internal priorities. So assessing the goals and the drivers in relation to the current maturity of your systems is an incredibly important first step. And so on that note, I actually want to just throw up another quick poll here before I turn it over to Tim to talk through how to actually start implementing systems to accomplish solving some of these problems rather than just dwelling on the problems themselves. So over to you, Anne-Marie, for the poll.
Okay, great. And we have our second poll. And the poll question is, what level of maturity would you say your organization is at when it comes to sustainability implementation? We haven't started or are just beginning. We have set goals, but no implementation plans. We are in the process of implementing, but could improve. We have a mature sustainability program and clear roadmaps. Other, please answer in chat. So let us know what your maturity level is regarding your sustainability implementation. We haven't started or are just beginning. We've set goals, but no implementation. We are in the process of implementing, but could improve, or we have a mature sustainability program and clear roadmaps. Other, please answer in the chat. So I see that people are answering. Great engagement by the audience. Wonderful to see. And it looks like we still have some people that are voting. So I'll give people a few seconds to complete. And we'll give people 5 more seconds, and then we will close the poll. So in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So let's close the poll and see the results. So very interesting. 29% we haven't started or are just beginning. 21% we have set goals but no implementation plans. 43%, that's very strong, we are in the process of implementing but could improve. And then we've got a 5%, we have a mature sustainability program in place. And then we've got some others who have answered in the chat. So great responses. Wonderful to see the engagement today. Thank you all for voting in the poll. And now I will hand it back to Keith.
Great, thanks, Anne-Marie. Yeah, that's I'd say that's pretty typical of what we see in the landscape. There are some people that just don't know how to get started, a few people that have set goals but haven't really planned out how they're going to get to those goals, and then a lot of people that are in the process of doing something, but they know that they can be doing that something better. So, Tim, I will turn it over to you to talk about how we improve.
No, I think this is great. Thank you, Keith, for teeing this up and the great poll question from Anne-Marie. Hi, everyone. Tim Taylor with CBRE and Global Workplace Solutions. So when I think of the opportunity here, Anne-Marie, if you want to go to the next slide, I think of the milestones of where are you at within your journey, and I think the industry itself, earlier, where we would, it felt a lot like preaching of like, well, you should be here, you should be doing this. And what we found as, highly effective with each client is just recognizing the fact that this is a journey of, understanding where they are. And that starts with a simple discussion. So as the poll question, I think, kind of perfectly aligned with things of, what I want to drive the question is, how do we move from ambition to impact? Any of the folks on the line that have worked with me know that I have a knack for oversimplifying. So I took this slide and tried to, create those milestones of what, where are you today, and what are some of the things that we could get you from 1 to 2. So, as the first one starts is, set an ambitious goal. Let's talk about the goal. What are you trying to achieve? Because it's a cliche, but it is very true of, you can't manage what you don't measure. And so what are you trying to achieve to begin with? And then let's talk about, the measurement process. And then let's talk about the management process. So let's start there. And CBRE, we see this all across the board. I think the poll answers that spectrum of where people are in their journey is very indicative of what we see across Fortune 500 companies. And I appreciate everybody's honesty on the response there. So once you have a goal, and I think it's okay to say, hey, I don't have a goal. Sometimes the goals come from the CEO doing a press release and saying we're going to be net zero by 2050. What does that mean? Everybody walks away going, uh-oh, like now what? And And sometimes it happens that way. And that's okay as well. Sometimes there needs to be a catalyst there. But, from the goal, the next step is to create the baseline. What are we talking about? How do we level set? How do we understand what you've reported in the past? Maybe we can bring best practices to the table and understanding, where we are in that journey as well. That's a big deal in the sustainability world, especially with carbon disclosure project. What's your baseline? Are we talking? Okay, yeah, you saved energy, 40%, but is that a 2004 baseline? Like, is that ambitious enough? Does that match what your company is trying to achieve? So we ask those sorts of questions. From that baseline, we are now able to start bringing technology to the table and analytics of how do we take that baseline, normalize the data, validate it, and make it auditable. I think that's a huge part of our business too. Anything that we're proposing, we're under the assumption that, stakeholders, investors, federal regulations, whatever it may be, whatever the flag may be, there are different audits in process. So we want to propose solutions that are fully auditable and fully transparent. So creating technology that gets to the heart of that. The fourth one, and I will say, the clients that I'm working with now, I would say teeter between a 3 and a 4. What I mean by that is they've already seen the impact of technology and what is their why. Why are we doing this to begin with? But then they're also seeing the power of what technology can bring to the table, which we'll get into in later slides. But then the question becomes, well, what if we're not on track? So now we're starting to create solutions that are scalable, that align with your current business practices. And then 5, I always think is the aspirational. What's next level? To me, I think it's pretty easy of what next level is. In my mind, it's net zero. And so we can kind of create that. It's named a lot of different ways. It's calculated quite a bit of ways right now. There's a lot of room for improvement there. But I would say that's my guiding star of talking about what's next level. But I also want to, definitely tell everybody it's a journey, and getting from 1 to 5, it doesn't matter where you are in the journey, but kind of laying out the foundation. It's hard to get to number 5 if you haven't really even created a baseline for what you're talking about. And then that way it also provides clear communication to your relevant stakeholders. And so next slide, Anne-Marie, please. So one of the things that we talked about is, when we think about implementing technology, one of the things that I wanted to showcase on this slide is just how many pieces of data are floating around there. So kind of in that, the mile markers between 1 and 2 of, okay, having a goal that's a defined goal of ESG. I think it should be public facing. I think, you should be held accountable to, stakeholders. But then also acknowledging the fact that there's lots of different data flowing around. So for our designers that are on the phone, yeah, it might be cool, the newest technology, let's put it into the specifications. But where's all that data going? Who's managing it? How does it all come together? And how does this become impactful? So this slide, just with the pretty pictures and all, but really just the accent of this is really in a just kind of the energy and carbon side of things. We can slice and dice ESG a lot of different ways. So there's just an enormous amount of data that comes into the mix. Next slide, please. And from here, this is kind of our approach, the CBRE, energy and sustainability technology architecture. First and foremost, we try not to be one brand for our technology piece. We're not, we want to make these as plug and play as possible and getting clients to use kind of their own data resources, and maybe we're just the ones aggregating it. Also, we'll get into that a little bit later. But so I think of it, kind of holistically of your source data. Source data, as seen on the previous slide, comes in all kinds of different ways, comes in all kinds of different forms. I think a good one for this, as an example, is the miles that are traveled for corporate travel. This plays in greatly into corporate emissions and carbon emissions, But as a real estate company, we don't really want to get into the game of being, travel agents. So that's one of our things of where we know that it's a huge part of the process and the reporting process, specifically for CDP and our Scope 3 emissions. But we also want to aggregate that data and use it in a way that we can present it back to the relevant stakeholders and the client. We don't want to actually, have that data housed on our side. We really just want to make it meaningful for our clients. So the source data comes into what we call the enterprise data platform, because our core business with Global Workplace Solutions is facilities management. So that comes into how are your buildings operated and maintained on a daily basis? How are they the lease renewals? How does that happen? How are projects built, and how does this affect your bottom line? I would say that's CBRE's core business, and we don't want to create a silo associated with that. We want to complement the work that's already going on there. So the energy and sustainability data platform is seen in a couple of different flavors, but it's really just the aggregation of all the different data points coming in here. And the output that we're trying to achieve is twofold. The first fold is external reporting. So for our sustainability professionals and our compliance professionals on the phone, the idea of taking lots of different data pieces, automating it as much as possible, aggregating it as much as possible, and giving it a meaningful structured output so we can then take it for ISO standards, CDP, GRI, whatever the external reporting system is important to our clients. We want to make sure that that structure is in place. And that all starts with kind of, taking all the different source data, putting it in a meaningful reporting mechanism. And then the other side of the coin, besides the external reporting system, where I get most excited, to be really honest, is the business intelligence dashboards, like customizing a view that is important to the client. And to be honest, this can change. We've already seen this in a short amount of time, is that leadership on the client side has changed. And so the things that they're most passionate about has changed, so we can actually tweak our view to, it's all the same data, it's all being aggregated in the same place, but how we are then bringing this to the client and showing a portfolio-wide transparent process is really important. And we'll definitely get some examples later on in the presentation. But this is really kind of just a brief sketch of the technology architecture. Okay, and to the next slide, please, Anne-Marie.
Great. So I will take back over here for a moment. Thank you, Tim. That was very insightful. I appreciate it. And like Tim said, we'll get into some working examples of some of those dashboards and the application of this data in just a moment. So you can go ahead and advance, Anne-Marie. Sorry about that. All right. So, as I mentioned before, the opportunities for integrating the technology into your building sustainability programs are many, right? And this is not even close to an all-inclusive list that's on the screen here. And how you implement will be highly dependent on the priorities of your organization. But just to give a few examples here. So, starting from the design phase on the screen here. So when we're designing buildings, obviously there's a ton of opportunity to implement things that will, to Tim's point earlier, eventually be gathering data in order for the operational folks to use those to optimize the way that they operate the buildings, right? So things like building information modeling, that tends to be something that we think about in the design phase in order to have a working common data environment or common operating model that we can work from there. So additionally, things like energy modeling are efficient ways to figure out how we're going to make the buildings better going forward. There are an emerging set of materials related databases and tools out there, everything from looking at the the carbon, the embodied carbon of materials, all the way through like supply chain of materials, making sure that you're getting the actual product that you ordered. So that's incredibly important in the design phase. Embedding things like climate risk analysis when you're designing and building or placing buildings, figuring out is the place where you're building your replacement headquarters going to be underwater or getting hit by hurricanes every few years, and designing out that risk or moving those buildings. And then, of course, as you introduce cloud-based collaboration, there are some challenges there as well. But that allows people to, who otherwise would have had to email or things of that sort, to all kind of collaborate in the same space. And things like BIM speak to that as well. So onto the construction phase. Obviously, BIM is still there, and I should have put it in the operations phase as well, but I forgot. But there's also things like 3D printing. So, we're now seeing technology where you can design this stuff in advance and then go out to the job site and print your own building out of concrete, right? So you're not having to bring in as much physical resources as you would have previously. You're designing and then building on site. And that's all accomplished, of course, through robotics. Robotics have other purposes as well. I've seen robots that hang drywall now, which kind of takes the fun out of it, but that's okay. Of course, when you're dealing with construction, there's a big push for virtual or augmented reality. I'm sure some of you have seen things like the VR goggles that can help you, look at the design documents and see where stuff should be in the walls, and that can also transfer over to the operations phase as well. One of the biggest pushes that I've seen recently is using AI to do predictive analytics of the scheduling for construction processes, right? So you have a predetermined schedule for when things are going to happen, but there can be interruptions to that based on supply chain disruptions or what have you. So construction companies are actually now starting to implement these predictive analytics that can say, hey, we're having trouble getting our shipment of wood, so that's going to delay this phase, which will in turn delay these parts of the processes, but we can compensate elsewhere, right? Onto the operations phase, the most obvious one, of course, is building automation systems here, which I sort of intentionally left off the list because I figured most people knew about that. But when you're talking about that and technology like BIM, of course, you get into discussion of things like digital twins, which can happen in the design phase, or you can have, or it can be introduced in the operational phase of the building if you want to do that. Of course, energy efficiency is a lot of the stuff that Tim is speaking to, but other examples as well. Just general asset lifecycle management, like figuring out how generalized maintenance or predictive maintenance or preventative maintenance, excuse me, will help you maintain and lengthen the life cycle of your assets. Smart and connected devices are all the rage nowadays and introduce a ton of new opportunity for improvement, but also a ton of concern in things like cybersecurity and what have you. I've seen drones being used to not only do things like environmental compliance monitoring of areas, but also just things like facade inspections, right? Where you're in a city and it's very difficult to do a facade inspection without having somebody hang off a rope and go look at the entire wall of your building, right? But a drone can do that fairly easily now. And then, of course, as you gather all these data and technologies together, you have the opportunity for things like AI and machine learning that introduce opportunities that we didn't even know existed previously because we just didn't have the capacity to do that level of analysis. And then, of course, moving on to the deconstruction or decommissioning portion, material reuse or that circularity discussion is increasingly important in the buildings world. So things like adaptive building reuse. So rather than knocking down a building, we redesign it to have a different purpose. And you're seeing this especially nowadays, with the influx of COVID over the last couple of years and the uncertainty of how, say, the commercial office space market is going to play out in the next few years. some owners are transferring office space into other applications, right? So rather than knocking down a building, they'll actually just change it over to a different type of application. And then, of course, when you're dealing with the decommissioning or deconstructing of a building, there's the whole discussion of waste diversion and how do you track and manage and ideally lessen the amount of waste going into landfill. So, like I said, certainly not an all-inclusive list, but as you can see, there's a ton of opportunity for just integration of technology throughout the building life cycle. And I will turn it back over to Tim here to give us some examples of how that's actually used primarily on the operational phase. But first we wanted to hit the last poll of the session here, and then we'll get some examples running. So Anne-Marie, over to you for the poll.
Thank you, Keith. So our last poll of the day, so I encourage everyone to take part. And the poll question is, which building phase do you see the most potential for technology improvements in your organization? And Keith went over the different phases of the life cycle asset. And is it in the design? Is it in construction phase? It is in the operations phase, in the decommissioning phase, or other? Please answer in chat. So the poll question, which building phase do you see the most potential for technology improvements in your organization? So let's see, we've got some people voting. Some results are coming in now. So do we see potential in design, construction, operations, decommissioning, or other? Please use the chat box. And we see that we're going to give everybody a few more seconds to vote. And we will close the poll then. So it looks like almost everybody has voted. So I will close the poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's close the poll and then see the results. So we see now, where do we see the most potential? And it looks like in operations. 42% see potential in operations, 32% in construction. Very good, 21% in design, and only 3% in decommissioning, and we've got some answers in others. Wow, very interesting results. Great to see the engagement here, and thank you again for taking part in our poll, and now I'll hand it back to Keith and Tim.
Great, thank you. Yeah, again, a very even mix between the design construction side of things where we've seen technology, and then I'm sure Tim agrees that it warms my heart to see so many people seeing opportunity in the operational phase of buildings. So anyway, I will turn it over to Tim to talk through some actual examples of how this stuff is put into practice. So Tim, over to you.
Yeah, agreed, Keith. Like that definitely warmed my heart. And just for the record, we're not allowed to vote. So even though we're terribly biased, definitely on the operations side. But I think that is indicative of where design and construction, lots of opportunity there, but then also seeing of how does this play into the day-to-day operations of the building, I think is really important. So we've already talked about the kind of the influx of data that is, bombarding clients at this point. But now let's start talking about where is it all coming from? And I think that's kind of what this slide really talks about. So this is a client example of where the client has public-facing goals, ambitious client-facing goals, and there's 10 of them. And so what I wanted to highlight here for this goal is that not only is there an enormous amount of work that goes into these public-facing goals, but also there's an enormous amount of stakeholders at the table for it to really happen. For success to really come to fruition, there has to be a lot of people involved. So telling the story, energy reduction, I think everybody sees energy, water, and carbon, and they go, yep, those are the big ones for, for public-facing goals, but also reducing waste, paper consumption, green leasing and sourcing too, especially as ESG and more governance comes into play. Sourcing becomes more and more of a key stakeholder. So just to kind of highlight the fact that there's just an enormous amount of people that are involved within every organization to make public-facing goals and get get you on that path from, ambition to achievement. So next slide, please, Anne-Marie. And so what's the end goal? What are we trying to go? So we've already kind of talked about how the sustainability platforms that we're using help to structure the external reporting system and create that rigor that is needed to have auditable external facing reports. I think that is huge. I think that will only become more and more prevalent as SEC filings and regulations come up over the next year in the US. But also, the other side of the coin where I'm definitely the most excited is, so going back to this client example, they had 10 external public-facing goals. And what we did is we basically mirrored those goals to give you real-time data and dashboards for real estate decisions. And what we are really hoping for, and we've had some great success that's come up over the last 2 to 3 months, is where we're taking this real-time data and working hand in hand with the key stakeholders, so the owners of this information. We're not telling them, to Keith's point earlier, we're not taking some sort of data solution and shoving it down their throat and say, this is exactly how you do it, you use my spreadsheet now. Like, it's not like that. It's more of like, what is your already internal process that is working smoothly for you, and how do we help that come to life? So on the next slide, Anne-Marie, I think we give a good example, and I'm glad the operations folks are on the line, because we wanted to start with plastics. And I think this is my favorite example of, kind of the last year of work. And it sounds, kind of trivial, but I think it illustrates greatly what we're trying to achieve and the outcome that we're trying to get to. So this is an example of a client's dashboard where they've decided that single-use plastic reductions is as important as all the other goals, and they want to make it public facing, and they want to create a target around that. So in the top right hand corner, you'll see the target of 100% reduction for single-use plastics. So when we first met with the key stakeholder, and in this case, all the single-use plastics is coming from the food services team. So again, CBRE, we are a commercial real estate company focusing on facilities management. We don't want to get into the food services industry. We want to complement the food services industry. We want, to kind of be a one-stop shop for clients to have their facilities maintenance and their facilities operations. But we personally don't want to get into, the food services industry. So when we sat with our food services stakeholder, we said, okay, what are the things that are most important? What are the questions you get all the time? What are, how do we drill down into the work that you're already doing? So first, we took kind of their automatic reporting mechanism that they were using. It was Excel. I mean, surprise, I don't know if everybody's going to be shocked to hear that, but it's all in Excel. And what they were doing is they were sending it out to their food vendors, and then say, fill out this very structured template and then send it back to us, every quarter. And so what we did is we took that spreadsheet and that process that they already had in place, and then we visualized it. And we said, we set up a reporting structure. We said, okay, we'll help you validate this. We'll get this into a reporting mechanism, and then we'll help you visualize. So how do we get here? What are you trying to accomplish here? And when we did our first user testing with it, the woman from food services would have jumped through the webcam to give us a hug, because she was like, this is the first, I've been working on this single-use plastic reductions goal for 3 years. And, I've created a very strict process that works really well internally, but it's manual. I'm having a lot of trouble, validating the data. And then also on top of that, the message gets lost. And so when we were doing the user testing, we pulled this up, and her eyes got really bright, and she was just like, yes, this is exactly what I'm trying to track. I want to talk about the locations. I want to talk about what's driving the initiative, and also where's the room for improvement. And so that was a huge win for us. And I think that's when we started to realize we're really onto something here with leveraging technology. And then the second win that we had happened just a couple days later, of where we were requested by the head of real estate to bring in, kind of show us, give a progress report of where we were. And we came in, the good consultants, we came in with a strong PowerPoint presentation ready to go. And the head of real estate said, no, I don't want to see any of your PowerPoint presentation. You can send it to me later. I want you to bring it up live. And so we brought up the dashboards, and we brought up the technology tool, and he took one look at it and said, well, it looks like Flavia packets is the reason why, this goal isn't on target. And we're like, yeah, that's kind of exactly right. It's milk jugs and Flavia packets. That's where you are. If you can see on the, you might have to zoom in a little bit on this dashboard slide. But yeah, that's exactly right. Everything else we've kind of figured out. And he goes, okay, so now I can use this dashboard and I can start thinking through what's my roadmap for removing Flavia packets. And now I'm asking the right questions, which I think is probably the most powerful piece of this, is giving executives and decision makers, first and foremost, the knowledge that they need and an ability to start making changes. And so instead of the food services department spending all of their time validating data and trying to tell a story with it, no, the visualization already kind of gives you the story, and now they're spending their time on impact. They are now spending all of their time figuring out what's the roadmap for reducing single-use plastics. Where are the pain points, and how do we work, and how do we create solutions with our client around that? So really impactful stuff there. And I just see this. I know this is single-use plastics, and we're talking about energy, we're talking about higher impact things, but I really like the storyline here of that. Clients are really starting to understand how to leverage their own data and start making real-time decisions, which unlocks capital, which unlocks a lot of red tape, all kinds of different things. And then to the next slide, please, Anne-Marie. And so that same concept really works with all of the 10 different public goals. Where are you today? And what are the drivers for that? So, in the top piece of the dashboard, you can see where the targets are. These are their, my clients' public-facing goals. We didn't create them with them. We are just here to support and here to make sure that they are successful in achieving those goals. And so what we noticed here is we said, okay, well, here are the drivers. Here are the buildings that are really kind of driving, the energy consumption. Here's how it's broken down regionally. So now that, the real estate organization is aligned regionally. So now you can have that conversation with each region, whether it's, Asia Pacific or the Americas, but you can see where the drivers are, where to focus your efforts. And through this visualization, we're starting to get the right questions. Okay, well, we see that we're not quite on target, and we have kind of these milestones, and they might not be aligned with where we are today. So now what do we do? How do we scale? How do we get there? And then so, Anne-Marie, if you could go to the next slide. And so what we've also able to do, because we're taking the real-time data and kind of giving you that snapshot, we're then refreshing that, whether it's as all the different data points come in and as are refreshed as are typical to the the normal procedures within the organization. But then what we're also able to do is we're taking those public-facing goals and we're saying, okay, well, here's your goal year. It's 2025. If you continue business as usual, so that top line is business as usual. You don't do anything else. This is where you're going to end up at 11%. Only problem is you're at 25, or your goal's at 25%. And using data, again, these are all verifiable numbers. We're allowed to, keep this data in our back pocket of where anybody who wants to, dig into the numbers, we absolutely can. But what does that 14% shortfall mean for your business? And really what it comes down to is you're going to have to start spending capital, and we can put a number to that. We can give you a ballpark estimate to that and then start to refine that over the next year or two as we're building out your capital pipeline. But just really exciting stuff and all of this is kind of based off of taking the data that already exists, giving it to the client in a portfolio-wide view so they understand what they're looking at, and giving, you know, executives the ability to make real-time decisions that impact their business, and being able to toggle between, okay, if you do this, that will happen, and this will be the impact to your goal. Really exciting stuff. But I know we want to leave some time for question and answer, Keith, but that's it
Absolutely.
for me.
Thank you so much, Tim. I appreciate it. So we're going to go ahead and open it up. Anne-Marie, did we have any questions come through the Q&A portion?
We have one question here. The question is, we don't have a sustainability plan. How would you recommend we get started, and how would we get buy-in from leadership?
I can address that, or Tim, go ahead. I'm sure you do this more on a day-to-day basis if you want.
Okay, so if you're starting completely fresh, my favorite way to do it is to start with just the facts. And so as CBRE, we align to different sectors, and it just so happens that the sector I'm most aligned with is incredibly competitive, just wonderfully competitive. And every question and every executive wants to know what their peers are doing. So when I say just the facts, I think that's always a great start of, okay, where do we sit with our peers? Where do we sit in the industry? What are the markers that are happening within the industry, as well as within the region where you're headquartered? Because I think there's going to be different strategies in EMEA versus the Americas, and I think everybody's kind of aligning differently. First and foremost, understanding the motivations of what does move your organization to begin with. I think that's question one. And then question two, if I was to look into the tea leaves, what are my competitors doing, and what is regulations looking like? And I think right there you already start to kind of create a roadmap for what is the message I want to give to leadership. But Keith, I don't know if I missed anything there.
No, I don't think you missed a lot. I would add to it that different organizations have different drivers. So in addition to looking at what's out there in the market and what your competitors are already doing, it's good to look at why you want to do this in the first place, right? Like, are you driven by impending regulations or existing regulations that you have to meet? Is this a checkbox exercise for you? Is this something where you're trying to reduce costs? Are you trying to manage reputation? Are you trying to in the case of a commercial real estate company, they might be looking to increase rental values for their spaces, right? So there's a variety of different reasons that you could pursue these types of goals. And I think understanding what your motivation is, in addition to, like I covered a little earlier, where you are in that maturity model, really helps you set the stage for that next phase, which is setting goals, right? You can't set goals, to Tim's earlier point, you can't set goals unless you have the data to tell you where you are right now, right? You can't just say, we're going to go there, right? You have to know where you are in order to know where you want to be in 5 or 10 years. So that's what I would add to that. So thank you, Tim.
The other question we had was about participants are asking, will they receive a recording of today's webinar? And yes, you will. All participants today will receive a link to the recording of today's webinar. I think now I'll go on to About BSI. So if we have a few more minutes remaining. About BSI, our purpose is inspiring trust for a more resilient world. We help shape and guide innovation through improving and standardizing business processes, products, and services to enable advancement. We offer expertise, knowledge, innovation, and best practice. We are an integrated global enterprise, 84,000 clients in 193 countries across the world, and 128,000 client sites. We have a strong global footprint, and our clients range from globally recognized brands to small local businesses. Some information about our solutions. We have our BSI training classes, both virtual and face-to-face, with classes for a variety of ISO standards, including ISO 9001, ISO 14001, the Environmental Management System Standard, as well as BIM classes specific for the built environment. We also offer ISO 19650, BIM verification and kite mark. We have our consulting services, including sustainability-focused services. If you're interested in any of our BSI solutions, please indicate this on the post-event survey, which will pop up as soon as the webinar is over. Just a little bit more about our handout materials. We have our very popular little book of BIM with BIM acronyms explained in detail, plus other information, the Perspectives Case Studies report, our BIM training brochure, and our sustainability report, which is really interesting. I think you'd all like to read that one. Please complete the post-event survey in order to be able to receive all of today's handouts. At this point, I'd like to thank everyone for attending today's webinar, and a special thanks to our speakers, Keith and Tim. All participants today will receive a link to the recording of the webinar, as well as links to our featured handouts. Again, you must complete the post-event survey. It'll pop up right away. If you have any questions about BIM verification or kite mark, certification, consulting solutions, sustainability, technology and sustainability, please indicate this on the post-event survey and we will get back to you right away. Once again, thank you to our speakers. Thank you to all for attending, and have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.
Take care, everyone. Have a good day.
Thanks, everyone.